Hey guys, welcome back to more HOA stories. In this video, a crazy HOA destroyed my farm, claiming that I illegally encroached on their land, which was a complete lie. Let's dive right into the video. The first one is titled, "Am I the jerk for helping my mom take over our HOA to get revenge?" I, 32 male, grew up in suburban Arizona with my sister Zinnia, 31 female, and our parents. This story spanned several years and recently came to a head, making me question if we handle things the right way. When I was around 7, my dad helped my sister and me build a cardboard fort in our front yard. We were so excited, it was like having our own little castle. My dad even helped us decorate it with markers and put a little flag on top. We spent hours playing in it that afternoon, pretending we were defending our fortress from dragons. Eventually, we got distracted by dinner and other things, leaving the fort out overnight. The next morning, we woke up to find bright orange violation notices plastered all over our front door. Our HOA president, Mr. Vernon Crowley, had personally called our house 3 times about the so-called unsightly garbage in our yard. My dad just shrugged it off and helped us take down the fort, but I remember seeing how annoyed he looked. Fast forward about 8 years, my dad decided to repaint our house since the Arizona sun had really done a number on it. The HOA had these paint templates that were basically 50 shades of beige. I'm not kidding, they all looked identical. My dad found this nice greenish tan color that he liked to call desert sage and submitted it for approval. When they didn't respond within the required time frame, he went ahead and painted the whole house. That is when all hell broke loose. Mr. Crowley showed up at our door, practically purple with rage. He spluttered, "This is completely unacceptable," waving a color wheel around. "This is Yucatan, it's not on our approved spectrum." My dad, who is usually super chill, just crossed his arms and said, "Vernon, it's practically the same color as half the houses on the street. I'm not repainting my entire house because you cannot tell the difference between sage and sand." Well, the next day, this fancy-looking contractor shows up with some kind of electronic color-matching device. We then get another notice with a 4-page analysis of how our paint color was precisely 3.7 shades too green and had to be repainted by the end of the month or we would face daily fines. That is when my mom Thea got involved. She started asking questions about how the HOA meetings and discovered that barely anyone ever showed up to vote. Mr. Crowley had been president for 15 years, running unopposed every time. She also noticed that all the landscaping and maintenance contracts went to companies owned by his son-in-law, charging way above market rates. Mom spent the next few weeks going door to door talking to neighbors. She would bring homemade lemon bars, her secret weapon, and just chat with people about their experiences with the HOA. She discovered that everyone had similar stories about ridiculous fines, arbitrary rule enforcement, and a general feeling of helplessness. You know what's funny? Our neighbor Mrs. Knightley told her, "I wanted to plant some native wildflowers to save on water, but I got fined because they were apparently not uniform enough." Meanwhile, Vernon's daughter got approval for a bright purple front door. My mom decided to then run for HOA president. She made simple flyers explaining her platform of common sense rule enforcement and financial transparency. The night of the election, the community center was packed, the highest turnout in HOA history. Mr. Crowley looked like he had swallowed a lemon when my mom won by a landslide. Once in office, my mom started digging through the records, and it turns out that Mr. Crowley's son-in-law's company was charging $5,000 monthly to maintain our desert landscaping, basically just spraying water on rocks and cacti. The previous company had charged $800. She found dozens of similar contracts, all grossly overpriced. Instead of changing all the rules, Mom just stopped enforcing the stupid ones. Paint colors? As long as it was not neon, she did not care. Kids' toys in the yard? Well, unless they were there for weeks, no problem. Native plants? Encouraged. She terminated all the inflated contracts and hired local companies through competitive bidding, saving the HOA thousands each month. For 6 years, our neighborhood thrived. People started talking to their neighbors again, kids played outside more, and gardens got more colorful. Even property values went up because people actually wanted to live here. But then last month, my mom decided she was was done. She did not show up for the re-election, saying she wanted to focus on her new pottery hobby. A guy named Harrison Walsh got elected, and he is trying to bring back all the old rules with a vengeance. Yesterday, he sent violation notices to half the neighborhood about everything from non-standard mailbox heights to unapproved garden decoration placement. People are furious. My sister and I have been helping organize resistance, setting up a neighborhood Facebook group, collecting evidence of selective enforcement, and encouraging people to attend meetings. Here is where I might be the a-hole. We discovered that Walsh is actually Mr. Cowley's nephew, and we've been spreading this information along with copies of the old financial records showing the previous corruption. We are basically forcing another election through a clause my mom found years ago about the vote of no confidence. Some neighbors think that we are being too aggressive and should just work with the new board. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for helping orchestrate what is basically a coup against a new HOA president instead of trying to work with him? And yeah guys, let me know what you think about this in the comments. Is OP being the a-hole here because he fights back against potential dictators or not? Let me know in the comments. Edit, thanks for all the responses. A lot of people are asking about the legal aspects, and yes, we kept copies of all the old financial records showing the inflated contracts. So my mom had everything professionally audited when she took over. We also got documentation of every discriminatory rule enforcement instance under the old administration. The vote of no confidence clause requires signatures from 60% of homeowners and evidence of either financial misconduct or discriminatory practices. We are currently at 72% signatures. Comment number 1, NTA, your mom is a legend and you're following in her footsteps. HOAs are meant to maintain property values, not be personal fiefdoms for power-tripping a-holes. Document everything and keep fighting the good fight. Comment number 2, NTA, fellow Arizonan here, the paint color thing is such a power trip move. Our HOA tried the same thing actually. These people need to realize that having slightly different shades of beige is not gonna make the neighborhood collapse into chaos. Update to the story, a lot has happened in the past month, so I wanted to give you all an update. So first off, we hit the required signatures for the vote of no confidence within 48 hours of my last post. It turns out we were not the only ones keeping records. Our next door neighbor, Mrs. Knightley, the one who wanted to plant wildflowers, had been documenting every single selective enforcement incident for the past decade. She is a retired paralegal and had everything organized in spreadsheets with dates, photos, and copies of notices. The emergency HOA meeting to address the vote of no confidence was wild. Over 200 people showed up. They had to move it from the community center to the high school gymnasium. Harrison Walsh showed up with a lawyer, clearly not expecting what was coming. My sister Cinia had put together a PowerPoint presentation, she works in corporate communications, showing side-by-side comparisons of similar violations that received different treatments. For example, like how Walsh had cited 3 families for unapproved landscaping when they planted native desert flowers, but approved his friend's artificial turf installation without any real review. The real bombshell came when my mom's old accountant, who we had hired to review the current books, presented his findings. Remember those landscaping contracts I mentioned? Mr. Walsh had already signed new contracts with his uncle's, the former president's, company at double the inflated rates from before. We are talking $10,000 a month to water rocks. The accountant also found out that Walsh had started an emergency maintenance fund and transferred almost $50,000 into it without board approval. Walsh's lawyer tried to argue that the vote of no confidence was not valid because some signatures were electronic from our online petition. That is when Mrs. Knightley stood up and cited the exact section of Arizona law that allows for electronic signatures in HOA matters. She also pointed out that Walsh's own election might be invalid because he had not disclosed his family relationship with the former president as required by our bylaws. The best part though, Walsh tried to claim that he had no idea his company choice was related to the former president, and that is when my sister played a recording from a neighborhood barbecue 2 weeks ago where Walsh was literally introducing the guy as "my dear Uncle Vernon." Totally legal to record in Arizona since it was in a public space. The vote was 192 to 15 to remove Walsh, but here is where it gets really good. Instead of just replacing him, we held an emergency election for the entire board. My mom did not want to run again, she is really into that pottery thing now, she is even selling pieces on Etsy, but she helped us put together a slate of candidates. They all won by huge margins, and the first thing the new board did was cancel all contracts with Walsh and Crowley related companies. Number 2, hire an independent auditor to track down that emergency fund money. Number 3, set up an online system where violations have to be photographed, documented and reviewed by at least 2 board members before the notices can even be sent out. Number 4, create an appeals process for violations. Number 5, start a complete review of all HOA rules with input from homeowners. Here is the really satisfying part. The auditor found that Walsh had already spent some of that emergency fund money. So it turns out he had hired a consulting company, surprise surprise, owned by his cousin, for $15,000 to review HOA efficiency. The new board is taking legal action to recover the funds. Mrs. Knightley says that we have a solid case for civil fraud. Walsh and Crowley have been sending angry emails claiming they are gonna sue everyone for defamation. Mrs. Knightley's response was beautiful. Truth is an absolute defense against defamation. We welcome the discovery process. They shut up pretty quick after that. The best outcome though? The neighborhood feels different now. People are out in their yards again, kids are playing outside, someone started a community garden in that empty lot by the park, properly approved by the new board of course, and even the property values are up. It turns out that people actually want to live in a neighborhood where they don't have to fear their HOA. My mom is really proud of how everyone came together. She had us all over for dinner last night and could not stop smiling. Sometimes, she said, you have to shake things up to make them right again. Oh, and our house? Well, it is still that same desert sage color. Mrs. Knightley's first official act as president was to approve it retroactively, just to close that chapter for good. Comment number 1 from Reddit: everyone sucks here. The old president was clearly corrupt and the new guy seems to be following the same path. But your family's approach to fixing things is equally problematic. Your mom used her position to basically ignore the rulebook instead of properly amending it, and now you are leading what amounts to a vigilante campaign against the new board. There are proper legal channels for addressing HOA misconduct. Use those instead of turning this into a neighborhood soap opera. Comment number 2, you are the a-hole. You and your family are acting just as petty and power hungry as the people you complain about. Instead of trying to work with the new administration or proposing changes through proper channels, you immediately jump to organizing a smear campaign. Yes, Walsh might be related to Crowley, but digging up old drama and spreading it around the neighborhood is just stirring up unnecessary conflict. Just be adults and handle this professionally. And the next one is titled, I went off grid in just 1 year and a power-hungry HOA destroyed my farm claiming I encroached on their land. I spent years working as an agriculturist and I really did love my job. I got to help a lot of farmers improve their farms and produce more and better crops. I had a dream for a while though, that I wanted to get away from the world and start living just on my own. Totally off grid from everybody else and get to not worry about the other people or money or any of that stuff that would be the reason I would stay awake at night staring at the ceiling and not sleeping. Here in South America at least, there's still some open and not really developed land that you can buy. Some of it were old farms that died out and the land just sat there and got overgrown and natural again. I kind of love how the earth can kind of heal itself in that way from some of the damage that people might do to it, like how I read when people were stuck indoors that some rivers really started to clear up and look better than they had in decades. Either way though, I had saved enough money and bought one of those pieces of empty land in full. It was empty and beautiful and I couldn't wait to start making it on my own. One warning that I want to give people thinking of living off the grid is to speak to your local government and make sure everything you plan to do is alright. It varies in places, but I made sure to get the okay that I could cultivate the land how I wanted to before I even bought it. I also would advise to do another thing I did, which was to be very careful with the paperwork you get when buying the land. I made sure to keep all those papers in a safe place and organized. A lot of people have no idea where their deeds or proof of property ownership are. Having it can help with a lot of headaches down the line, just trust me. Living off grid did not mean that I was being lazy and not doing any work. In fact, I was working harder than ever before, but I didn't hate it. I had planted crops so I would have things for myself to eat and set up a collection for rainwater that I could later boil in order to get clean water for myself. I had some money left over, so once I built a proper place for them, I also got some animals to take care of. I knew if I took good care of them, they would take good care of my needs by giving me milk and eggs. All in all, it took me roughly a year to really get a routine going and get this project started and going. It was a nearly independent lifestyle, as there was only one thing that I couldn't get myself and instead opted to trade for, which was the feed for the animals. I could have probably made the feed myself, but I was just one guy after all. I traded crops for the feed, and from there I was pretty much set up to spend my life independently and feeling great about it. As far as other people near me, the farm I traded with was about 3 miles west of my farm. Now about 8 miles east there was a gated community made up of rich people. They would throw money and waste so many resources and especially food like it was nothing. They were the type of people that I was glad to not be near, and since I was 8 miles away, I figured they wouldn't bother me. That was until an HOA formed within them and they started to cause problems for me too. They came out to visit me and I assumed that they needed something. Sometimes parents want kids to see a farm or they want to know if I sell any fresh veggies for them. Instead though, they came right out of the gate insulting me and complaining that my land smelled bad. What they were smelling were the cows, which I will admit, if not used to, can smell. But they were the ones that came on my property. I was not forcing them. Imagine if somebody walked into your bathroom for no reason, not invited in, and then complained that it smelled bad. Like, of course you walked into a bathroom. That also didn't stop the insults directed towards me for living such a supposedly backwards lifestyle. They said right in front of me, like I wasn't there, that there must be something wrong with me if I was living by myself on land and off-grid. One mentioned to be careful because I could be some kind of serial killer staying out there to avoid police and maybe look for victims. I made it known that I could hear them and did not appreciate the crap they were saying. HOA guy: okay, look, we came down here to talk about the land you're on. Me: oh, if you're wanting to buy it, then sorry, but I'm not selling. HOA: don't think you can scare money out of us. A good portion of your land is on HOA property and we want it back right now. You're encroaching on our land. Me: I'm within my borders, plus your houses are way too far away for this to be anywhere near your lines. They pulled out a very old map that you could hardly read. It looked hundreds of years old and was showing lines that allegedly mapped out properties. The lines seemed way newer than the map and it was clear that they were hoping to pull a fast one over on me. HOA: see, this shows that this is our land, so you need to stop all of this. The HOA Karen gestured towards my entire property, so I guess this referred to my general lifestyle. You cannot even read that map. Come back with a modern land mapping and then try to pull that same stunt if you want a chance. I know what land I bought and own. HOA: prove to us by next week that you own the land and we might not throw you in jail for stealing from the government. They left, and as much as I didn't want to speak to them again, I actually got all of my paperwork together and brought it to a meeting so I could show them how the land was mine, and I knew it. I forgot that you cannot win an argument with a crazy person because the president just started to say that my paperwork was fake. She told me that her map was right and if I didn't comply and shut down my entire land and give it to the HOA, they would take legal action against me. Another thing they complained about was saying that their kids could wander onto my farm and get hurt by the animals, or bad things might happen if I was alone with them. Again, treating me like some criminal or bad guy when I've done nothing wrong. My response to that statement only made them even angrier. I said that if their kids were walking 8 miles away from town with no supervision, then maybe their parenting was the issue and they should be focusing on that, not on my land. I was working on getting a lawyer for what I assumed would be a lawsuit against me. If you are asking how I can afford a lawyer, well, it was because I didn't spend everything on the property and left money for my family to put into savings for me in case I ended up running into some kind of trouble. They did not touch the money, so a year later it was all still there and I was just trying to do research on who might be able to help me if they did go through with the lawsuit, which would just waste everybody's time since I knew it was my land and not theirs. I'm sure they knew it too and were just trying to intimidate me into leaving and getting themselves some free land instead. However, instead of suing me, the HOA rented a bulldozer and came to my property to destroy the section they claimed they had the rights to. They demolished about half of my fields and my water collection. I guess they didn't expect somebody like me to have a camera and capture what they did to my property. I went on the offensive and decided to sue them for destroying my land. What I really needed was the police to get involved and arrest them for these things. Either way, it took the local news and media to get enough attention in order for the police to do something. In court they tried to argue that they did not destroy my land because I did not own it. They used their own horrible map as some kind of evidence. My perfectly ordered documents were a lot more convincing, and the cherry on top was how far away I was from the development. Nobody in court could even buy that the HOA believed that I was on their property instead of my own. I even had a witness, which was the other farmer that sold me feed, telling people that I owned the land, and the community was not even involved out near us at all. It was basically his place, mine 3 miles down the road, and then a bunch of nothingness for 8 miles until them. The court ruled in my favor, saying it was my land, and the HOA knowingly destroyed it, without even bothering to go to the local government and question if the land could belong to them first. Finally, the HOA had to give me a ton of money because of the damage they did, and they complained, saying that I didn't need money because I lived off the grid. Well, that argument didn't go anywhere, and the court said I could not spend any of it if I didn't want to, but they still had to give it to me. They were also facing trouble with the government for their illegal activities, but I have no clue if they ended up in jail or not, and I don't care enough to look more into it. I did use the money though, because I had to fix my farm back up because of what they destroyed. I made sure to even get materials to build some protection around my fields this time, so it would make what they did harder next time if somebody else was gonna try it for themselves. I knew that living off grid was not gonna be easy, but I thought the problems would be a little bit different. Problems like a leaky roof or chickens breaking out and running away, not the kind of problems that I went off grid specifically to avoid. I could not stop rich people from living in their gated community, but I could demand to be left alone. After that first crazy year though, things seemed to get better and actually easier for myself. I love being separate from society and instead getting to live and just worrying about my basic needs being met. The HOA was hopefully the only hiccup I faced during the rest of my life out here. Before we end the video, we will read a funny story from r/malicious compliance. So this happened several years ago while I was working at a Taco Bell, and it involves a pretty gross customer request. So for those of you who don't know, Taco Bell asks for your name when taking an order so they can yell it out when your food is ready. One particular customer, a dude in his 40s wearing camo, decided to abuse the rule. When asked, he told the cashier his name was Daddy. This is not good in any situation, but the cashier at the time was a very young girl. I don't even think she was 18, and definitely not his actual daughter. Naturally, she goes to find the shift lead, Kevin, not his real name, and now Kevin is a lot of things, and one of those things is gay. I'm trying to find the right words to say this without offending anybody, so I'll just say that he really was not macho. We live in the Midwest, and I can guarantee he's been called more than one slur, even before actually showing romantic affection towards another guy. I was not there for that part, but I've been told his reaction to what the creep was trying to pull was like handing a needle to a kid in a balloon store. When the food's ready, Kevin goes up to the counter and just belts out, "Daddy," in exactly the tone you're imagining. Some people go silent, others start whispering, and the entire back is just trying not to laugh. Daddy doesn't say a word, just marches up, gets his food, and leaves. And yeah guys, thank you for watching. I will see you again tomorrow, and please don't forget to subscribe. Thank you so much.